Welcome back, everyone. As always, it is a blessing to be here. Before we jump in, do me a quick favor, hit that like button, share this with someone who needs to see it, and subscribe with the notification bell on so you never miss an update. Today we're talking about the Clarity Act and why it's not just another regulatory headline. This is XRP's regulatory endgame, and the part nobody else is covering is how ISO 20022 and this bill are about to unlock something massive for Ripple's bank charter and the entire RLUSD timeline. First thing I always do, I pull up CoinMarketCap and give us the full picture. The total crypto market cap is sitting at $2.16 trillion. Bitcoin dominance is sitting at 58.6%. Fear and greed is at 38, which puts us in fear territory. XRP is trading at $1.09. That's down 0.12% in the last 24 hours. Bitcoin is at $64,653. Ethereum at $1,934. This is a cautious market. Bitcoin dominance climbing while alts bleed tells me money is flowing to safety, but that fear reading is exactly where patient money gets positioned. Now let me tell you why the Clarity Act is different. Let me pull up this post from at Digital Asset Buy. It says Clarity Act emergency action and XRP October breakout signal. Watch the full YouTube video here. Here's what most people are missing. Everyone's talking about the urgency of the bill, but nobody is connecting the dots between the Clarity Act and ISO 20022. That's the gap. That's the unlock. The Clarity Act gives digital assets regulatory clarity by defining what is and isn't a security. For XRP, that's the end of the war. But here's the part that matters even more. ISO 20022 is the global financial messaging standard that goes live in full force in 2025 and 2026. XRP is one of the only digital assets built to natively speak that language. When the Clarity Act passes and XRP has full regulatory clarity in the United States, you're getting the regulatory foundation for Ripple to secure a bank charter, to scale RLUSD as a compliant stablecoin, and to plug directly into the ISO 20022 infrastructure that trillions of dollars in cross-border payments are moving to. This isn't hype, this is infrastructure, and the timing is everything. Let me pull up this article from Crypto News. The headline is Ripple Institutional Finance Stack Explained. It says Ripple is building out a full institutional finance stack that includes payment rails, liquidity solutions, and stablecoin infrastructure. Ripple's RLUSD stablecoin is positioned to be the compliant dollar layer for institutions that need to move value on-chain without the regulatory risk. This is the bridge between traditional finance and blockchain, but here's the catch. Without the Clarity Act, Ripple is operating with one hand tied behind its back. The Clarity Act is the starting gun, and the bank charter that Ripple has been positioning for, that only happens when US regulators have clarity on what XRP is. Once that clarity comes, Ripple isn't just a crypto company anymore. They're a licensed financial institution with access to federal payment systems. Now here's where the ISO 20022 piece becomes critical. The standard itself is already being adopted. SWIFT is using it. Central banks are using it. ISO 20022 isn't just a messaging format. It's a data-rich standard that allows payment metadata to flow with the transaction. That means compliance information, tax information, all the details that regulators need to see baked into the payment itself. XRP was designed for this. Ripple's ODL already uses XRP as the bridge asset between fiat currencies. And when banks and payment providers are fully on ISO 20022 rails, XRP becomes the most efficient way to settle those transactions in real time. But none of that scales to its full potential without US regulatory clarity. The Clarity Act removes the last barrier. And when that barrier falls, you're talking about every institution that needs to comply with ISO 20022, every bank that needs a bridge asset that's fast and cheap and regulatory compliant. XRP becomes the standard because of infrastructure and timing. And that fear reading we saw at 30, Bitcoin dominance is at 58.6%, which means money is consolidating into BTC while the broader market is uncertain. But fear is where the setup happens. When fear and greed is at 38, retail is scared, and smart money is quietly positioning. XRP at $1.09, down 0.12%, in a fear market while the Clarity Act is gaining momentum and ISO 222 is rolling out globally. This is not the time to panic. This is the time to pay attention. So here's the technical picture. XRP is trading at $1.09.5. The key level I'm watching on the downside is $1 flat. That's psychological support. If we lose a dollar clean, next support is 92 cents. But volume is drying up at these levels, which tells me we're in consolidation, not a breakdown. On the upside, the level that matters is $1.22. If we reclaim that with volume, we're setting up for a run to $1.40. The weekly structure is still intact. We're holding above the 50-week moving average, and the macro trend is still bullish. The moment the Clarity Act news accelerates, or we get a bank charter announcement from Ripple, this chart is going to move fast. Now let me talk about Bitcoin for a second, because Bitcoin at $64,653, up 0.04%, is basically flat. When Bitcoin is flat and XRP is slightly down, that's actually healthy. It means XRP is consolidating independently. Historically, the best XRP rallies happen when Bitcoin stabilizes and dominance starts to roll over. We saw a version of this in the 2021 cycle. XRP spent late 2020 getting crushed by the SEC lawsuit. And then once Bitcoin cooled off and dominance rolled over in the spring of 2021, XRP ran from around 25 cents to nearly $2 in about 2 months. The setup today feels similar. Bitcoin dominance is elevated, fear is in the market, and the regulatory catalyst is building. When dominance drops and money rotates back into alts, XRP is going to be one of the first to move because the regulatory clarity story is the most compelling narrative in crypto right now. Now let's talk about the rest of the basket, because XRP is not the only ISO 222 aligned asset on my radar. Stellar XLM is at 17.86 cents, up 0.22%. Stellar runs the same kind of cross-border rails as Ripple, and it has quietly been running real remittance corridors for years. H bar is at 6.87 cents, down 1.64%. Header O's governing council is the most institutional lineup in crypto, and that governance model is exactly what regulated finance wants to see. And XPR, Proton, is at 0.0026, basically flat on the day. XPR is the smallest name on this list by a wide margin, and that cuts both ways. It carries the most risk, but it is also where regulatory clarity would matter most, because a compliant payments chain this small has the most room to re-rate. Here's my take on the basket. If the Clarity Act passes, it does not only lift XRP, it lifts every compliant payments chain that has been waiting on United States rules, and that is exactly why I hold more than one name here. Let me talk about smart money. Whales have been accumulating XRP quietly over the last 2 months. We've seen multiple transactions in the 20 million to 50 million XRP range, moving off exchanges into cold storage. That's positioning. When large wallets are taking coins off exchanges, they're planning to hold through a move. At the same time, institutional interest in Ripple's products is growing. We've seen announcements from banks in Japan, in the Middle East, and Southeast Asia. The common thread is regulatory compliance. The Clarity Act is the final piece that unlocks US institutional adoption, and when that happens, the capital that flows into XRP isn't retail FOMO, it's institutional treasury allocation. That's sustained demand. Now, let's talk about the bigger picture. The S&P is at 7,405, down 0.09%. NASDAQ at 24,872, down 0.42%. Dow is up 0.51%. So we've got a mixed equity market keeping a lid on crypto in the short term. But here's what I'm watching. The Fed is in a holding pattern, inflation is cooling, and if we get any signal that rate cuts are coming, risk assets are going to rip. The Clarity Act is legislation, not just headlines. ISO 222 is infrastructure, not just a talking point. And Ripple's bank charter path is a real regulatory milestone. When those pieces come together, XRP moves independently of macro. Let me play devil's advocate. What's the bear case? The biggest risk is that the Clarity Act stalls again. If this bill doesn't pass in the next few months, XRP could trade sideways for longer. The second risk is that Bitcoin breaks down. If BTC loses $60,000 clean, the whole market goes lower. And the third risk is that Ripple's bank charter gets delayed or denied. Those are the risks. but the momentum behind the Clarity Act is real. We're seeing bipartisan support and urgency from lawmakers. On Bitcoin, the structure is still intact, and on the bank charter, Ripple has been preparing for years, so yes, there are risks, but the probabilities favor the bull case. Let me give you 3 scenarios. Bull case, the Clarity Act passes in the next 60 days, Ripple announces progress on the bank charter, and XRP breaks $1.40 and runs to $2 by end of year. Base case, the Clarity Act passes, but the timeline stretches into Q4 and XRP grinds higher to $1.50 to $1.60 by end of year. Bear case, the Clarity Act stalls, macro weakens, Bitcoin breaks 60,000 and XRP retests 90 cents to $1 flat. Which one do I think is most likely? I think the base case is most probable, but the bull case is more likely than people expect. So here's what I'm doing. I'm holding my position. I'm watching $1 flat as key support, and I'm ready to add if we dip to that level with volume. If we break $1.22 to the upside, I think we're off to the races. This is also why I keep my own XRP off exchanges and cold storage on a ledger. Links in the description if you want the one I use. Here's the bottom line. The Clarity Act isn't just another regulatory headline, it's the unlock for everything Ripple has been building. It's the bridge between XRP and ISO 222. It's the foundation for the bank charter. It's the regulatory endgame that allows institutional capital to flow into XRP without legal risk. And the people who understand that right now, while XRP is at $1.09 and fear and greed is at 38, are the ones who are going to look back in 6 months and realize this was the setup. The market rewards the people who position before the certainty arrives, and right now the pieces are aligning. If this was valuable to you, smash that like button, share it with someone who needs to see it, and if you haven't subscribed yet, hit that button and ring the bell. Drop your XRP price target in the comments. I want to hear where you think we're headed. As always, it is a blessing. See you tomorrow.